difficult. And then at the same time, we are pursuing loose fiscal and loose monetary policy in Iran. Loose fiscal policy means the government spending is on the rise, and that's common knowledge. Loose monetary policy simply because the government doesn't have money and the borrowing facility is not there, so therefore the government resorts to printing money. And that's why we have a high inflation performance and so forth. Here is a picture of the recent growth rates in Iran, 2000 to 2010 forecast. And these are real growth, 5.1%, so forth. Last year, 0.5%, which has now been realized. And for 2010, the growth rate is expected to be equal to 0. So with further deterioration in real sector of the real economy, therefore budgetary aspect of the economy, of the government will also be affected, which means that tax revenue would dwindle with the rising expenditure, deficits would rise, and therefore money printing would become the only choice, the only name of the game. CPI inflation, as we know, has been rising rapidly, 18% average of last 5 years. This year, with the removal or the beginning of removal of subsidies, are expected to be at 40%. Okay, now I'm just going to talk about this fund that I was referring to a second ago. Government has used the revenue from the oil stabilization fund to support expansion, fiscal and monetary policy. This goes back to 2001 when the fund was created. At one point, the fund had in excess of $80 billion resource in it. Now, today, speculation that we have hit we have depleted the time, so we're getting close to the bottom of the barrel from that perspective. So we no longer have sufficient funds in the oil stabilization fund to push against the global economic turn down. So that's why you see why the government in Iran is so anxious about pushing that bill of subsidy reform through. The Iran Central Bank technically is an independent institution like the Bank of Canada, but in reality it is not. Has not been able to conduct its monetary policy even if it wished to do so. As a matter of protocol, the central bank must approval from Majlis, the parliament, in order to issue participation papers and conduct other and forth. This is another intervention of the government into financial situation of the country. This is in the territory of the central bank, typically in a defined, well-defined nation. The government pressured the central bank to put a cap on interest rate, 12 and 13% respectively for state-owned banks and 13% on commercial banks. And this is around of inflation of probably 22% official figures that they have reported. So what does that imply? It implies with interest rate being 10% below the actual inflation, the real rate of return is minus 10%. And so that means no lenders would have any energy or desire to want to lend, but there would be plenty of borrowers. Okay. So this kind of policy is conducive to shortage, excess demand for who would get to borrow. Then is a question of favoritism once again, and those who have connection, contacts, and so forth, obviously would be in a position to borrow from the government, from banks at the preferred rate, and those who do not have that kind of advantage will be left out. Okay. Most of these financial intermediaries loans are low interest loans to state-owned enterprises and quasi-government agencies such as bonds. Currently, there is a $40 billion overdue claim against borrowers by Iranian commercial, and there is no chance to pay back in the near future. Now, I'm going to show you some picture about the incredible expansion of monetary policy of the last few years. The concept or the essence of central banking is control what's known as monetary base. Monetary base consists of currency in circulation and reserves of banking system. That's what central banks control, that commercial banks would turn around and lend money out to generate more money supply, more activity, and so on and so forth. So that's the ultimate definition of liquidity in the system. They put it in the global context in the last year and a half, 2 years in the United States. The U.S. Federal Reserve has thrown in trillions of liquidity up and keep the system from look at the numbers. 2 years, 2006 to 2000, the monetary base grows at the rate of 9%. Any standard environment where growth of GDP is next to nothing, which has been the case in the recently, this is before inflation. There are no two ways about it.
Excuse me. The GDP has in fact grown. I think the main reason for the growth in monetary base has been the increase of oil prices. So as you mentioned, the oil revenue went up. What the government did was doling that money out of the economy without actually investing in infrastructure. So the
last 2006, you're right, you're absolutely right. 2006, 2008, which the number is getting smaller. That's what I was basically getting at. Yeah, and then the number extends into 2009 when the growth was pretty minimal. So where I'm coming from was that 90% growth of monetary base required maybe 90% growth of GDP in order to create 7% inflation. So with 2% rate of growth of real GDP, will be minus that unless it's withheld at a later stage, it will be causing nothing but disaster from the perspective of financial success.
Does this mean that the real inflation already is above, is a huge number right now at this moment or in the past?
The latest figure is about some of the 38 to 40% that they are reporting.
That's for 2010, no?
That is correct.
In the past few years where the base has grown so much, in a president's modest growth
right.
in GDP.
Right. Very good. Okay. Excellent. So what has happened is that the central bank has injected that kind of system. However, the happens is that the level of economic activity is the further action down the road. In other words, transmission mechanism is flowing into the system. So which means that banks turn around money to private sector and hire more people, wage pressure, bottlenecks would be created and inflation would rise. Right. Now when you look at supply, money supply has not kept up with of monetary base. So that means that in fact not being able to create as much deposit as they wanted to. So is the weakness in this equation, maybe just for at this point in time. In other words, ingredient was there, but the out, which could have been totally out of control, took place because customers were not to get the activity going. The banks were willing to.
Yeah. What do you mean the rate of change for GDP during that period? I think the number was significantly grown, but the problem was the spending of the government, importing all these goods into the country, and thereby to allow people to buy those products and increasing the monetary base.
Right. Yeah. I don't have the GNI to share with you, but your logic is absolutely right. Is that the government correctly has ordered through substituting produced goods with imported product, which is exactly the opposite of what was called the export-led type of a strategy. In fact, the more dependent type of a strategy. I'll just give you one figure. In the four French government, the oil revenue was in the neighborhood in dollars, of which $200 million were imported. And these are primarily to Bazaar and the Pasarans channel. So that's one of the main reasons why the manufacturers has been hurt the way it has. A lot of things that could have used manufactured in parts and so on and so forth now is coming cheaper. The other, because of the shortage of funds, which is right now, manufacturing is not able to get the right credit to carry